You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Denkman. A new estimate for the number of unhoused people in King County was released this week. Over the past 2 years, the new data shows a 9% increase in the homeless population on any given night in King County and a total of over 18,000 homeless people in the region. The King County Regional Homelessness Authority, or KCRHA, runs the count with help from researchers at the University of Washington. KCRHA brought UW into the process in 2022 in an effort to get a more accurate snapshot. One of the standout data points, the new count suggests a nearly 11% decrease in the number of Indigenous people who are unhoused in our region since 2020, which should be good news. But the county's only urban housing and homelessness service provider dedicated to Native people says the latest figures likely represent an undercount, and according to them, it's not the first time. Derrick Belgarde is the executive director of the Chief Seattle Club. He joins me for more now. Derrick, thank you very much for being on KUOW.
Thank you, Libby. Thank you for having me.
So KCRHA releases this point-in-time count earlier in the week. What was your initial reaction to seeing just the top-line numbers?
Oh, it was a punch to the gut. Yeah, it was. To be honest, though, it wasn't a surprise. We've had issues with their past counts and their past release of data in past years, so it wasn't a total surprise, but it still was a severe gut punch. And the harm that this could be doing to our Native communities is just crazy.
Tell me more about your issues with the count itself. Maybe you could just walk us through what you see as the main problem with what the public received that report.
Yeah, the main issue is when the public sees it, they're going to actually get an idea in their head that the disparity is kind of getting addressed in a lot more rapidly pace than it actually is, which is going to lead probably to funders and policymakers, decision makers, grantors, funders, donors, all the like, right? That may alter their efforts in addressing this disparity. That's the big danger, right? We know the fight that we have is an uphill battle to begin with, but now they just put it back even further with this bad, irresponsible data.
And tell me, how do you know it's an undercount? Just to explain it to everybody, when you look at that and say it's a gut punch, how do you know?
So the last time that we were really confident and we actually had more input on how the one night count, the point in time count was conducted, 2020, that we were 15% of overall homelessness rate at that time. Today, if you look at the trajectory of straight across the board of overall homelessness, like you just pointed out, 9% increase just this year, right? Or, and then ours dropped 11%. It's just ridiculous to think that that's even possible. Chief Seattle Club have been doing great work. We've added 423 units to the housing stock, but that did not probably even address the increase of homelessness and the housing insecurity and the housing affordability issues we have in this region. So, just that alone tells me. And, and we also know part of the problem with the data and how they do it and how that, they collect racial demographics is a lot of Native people are multi-raced, right? It's just, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you check a box on this data collection and you check, Native American and Caucasian, Native American and something else, that you're automatically taken out of the Native demographic and put into the mixed race. And that's where a lot of it is, but it's still beyond that. It's also just about human relations. It's when you create a methodology where you're out interacting with people trying to collect data, it's about trust. It's about building a relationship, and you have to have a trusting environment there. As you know, in our history with government, with data collectors and all the like, we have a pretty rough history, right? And so there's a lot of traumatized people in our community, a lot of mistrust from these systems that aren't ran in an Indigenous culturally appropriate way. And so that's the step one. If you're going to get the data, if you don't start with step one, and if it's off, the end game's going to be off. So we should have been invited to the table at the beginning when they're selecting or creating a tool that's going to be used, collecting homelessness data, instead of coming at the tail end after they've developed a tool and then trying to figure out how this is going to reach our Native community.
It sounds like what you're saying is just on the surface, this 11% drop doesn't pass the smell test. And then in your experience as a service provider, you would have expected the number of Native homeless to actually go up. Is that what you're saying, or what is your expectation of what the actual number might be? I know you don't have an exact count, but
I mean, I would definitely see it. I don't know if I would say how confident I would say going up, but definitely in even with our efforts in the housing in the last 4 years, we've put in 423 units. But I'd say somewhere around maintaining, right? With an increase in the same trajectories other demographics have increased too. I bet you we probably somewhere in there. Definitely no 11% drop.
I mean, you've touched on this already, but obviously there are extra barriers to interfacing with the Native community, trust issues there, historic reasons why
Yeah.
some counter from the government coming around is not necessarily the most welcome presence. I'm curious what you think about the methodology that they use, these like coupons that are given out to unhoused people. They come in, they fill out a survey, and then they take those coupons to hand out to peers. This idea is, I think, that it's like a more peer-to-peer counting process than the one-day volunteers. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's some flaws right off the bat with that. That's assuming that all people of different cultural values and different things all value those coupons and incentives in the same way, and they don't. And some people have barriers to cross when they do get a coupon. Do I trust this and go in, or do I not? Other communities are more apt to do it and more, excited to go do that. And others are like, whoa, this smells, there's just flags here. Thanks for your coupon, but nope. Right. And so that is the big flaw in that. And so, that's why our community is also, we know one of the things that leads to our disparity is the fact that we don't get services throughout the board on all different types of social things, right? And because we're the hardest to reach community, because it takes a very strong culturally appropriate way to approach our community, to get our community at the door, to get them through. And even then it takes relationship building and trust building because of the level of trauma and PTSD. So, yeah.
We reached out to Zach Almquist, who's the University of Washington professor who helped develop this and run the point-in-time count for KCRHA. And he acknowledged that the Native and Indigenous homelessness community is, one of the hardest data points to capture accurately in any count of an unhoused population. He said there is also flaws, that contribute to this in the categorization process. And I'm going to read what he told us about that. Zach says the reported figure and any apparent decline in Native homelessness since 2020 are largely artifacts of how the categories are built, not evidence that fewer Native and Indigenous people are unhoused. That is why we need a dedicated report on Native and Indigenous homelessness produced with and for Native and Indigenous communities rather than only inside the federal framework, so the response is shaped by the people and communities most affected. What do you think about that? This idea that, there would be, again, a dedicated count, more resources towards this. It sounds like that's what your organization is also pushing for.
Yeah, I mean, I can't argue that. That's actually on point. I think that's true, and I think it's responsible, and I think it should be done, and it should be led by our community. Like we have the wonderful, UIHI Urban Indian Health Institute, and that should be leading that effort here. But it's a thing that needs to be given the tools, funding, right, opportunities to be able to do it, right. The burden of the responsibility of it shouldn't just be put on the communities that need the data that shows their own disparities. Right. So as long as that's not being done, and they're actually, and not just check the boxes being part of another research that's being led by another, academic institution or something, right? If it's truly led by UIHI, I think that's a great thing. I think it's the best thing, and it's probably the road to the most accurate data down the road.
It sounds like what you're saying, though, is there's a bit of, once the peanut butter's out of the jar on this issue, there's like, the word is out, oh, Native homelessness improved.
Yeah.
And that can be damaging in and of itself.
Yeah, I think there needs to be some sort of retraction, right? Like some sort of acknowledgement. I mean, I know that was an acknowledgement in itself, what you just read. But it's definitely not, that should be big, bold on top of the report, right? Like you can't miss it, that this is clearly stating this right off the bat when you're checking this data out, that these native numbers, don't list, don't read into them, right? That's got to be the first thing people should be reading and hearing about before they're even mentioned, right? But I don't know. I mean, hopefully we get there. And there's more to do. This just came out, so there's still more work to do and more interaction we have to have, with UW and with KCRHA, and so we'll see what plays out with it.
Is there anything else that you think is important to understand that we haven't talked about yet today? When either people are looking at these numbers or just in general with the work that the Chief Seattle Club is doing?
Yeah, what we do works, right? The Chief Seattle Club is very successful, very good at what we do, but we have a very niche focus, right? Chronic single adult homelessness. Someday we're going to get into family housing, but we have a lot of needs in our community when it comes to housing insecurity, especially homelessness, and not just chronic homelessness. We got family homelessness and a lot of other stuff we have to work towards solving. And so we have a lot of work. We got to support more of our native orgs who are trying to get into this housing development stuff, right? We just have to get more resources towards it, and if we're ever going to solve it. No communities are going to be able to thrive, without safe places. And you can't create that unless you create a sense of belonging. And you can't put one native family into a family complex of 200 units and think that they're going to have a sense of belonging there when there's no cultural representation at all in the architecture, the art, or the community, or the verbiage of the lease or whatever, all those things. You have to have cultural appropriateness if you're really going to get communities to thrive.
When we look at the broader report, another thing that jumped out to me was just seeing that there was a drop in the overall number of shelter beds in King County over the past couple of years. And that seems really frustrating. I mean, we're seeing obviously the COVID dollars going away. There was an increase in permanent supportive housing, and it sounds like your organization is also part of the housing push. What do you make about just the ongoing struggle to explain to people, the difficulty of solving this problem and how complex it is? And, because I think people see this number and they're just like, taxpayers, they just keep sending money towards it and nothing ever gets fixed. But, what I'm hearing you say is it's a really complex problem and we have to keep at it.
Yeah, it is. And one of my pet peeves about the work that we do and when I talk about it is everybody lumps everything up into homelessness. But you got to break it up. There's multiple crises that are happening simultaneously. There's a homeless crisis, and there's an equal, just as huge and just as serious mental health crisis right now. There's no mental health system to speak of that we once had, 30, 40 years. Yeah, every year it's dwindling down less and less. And like that needs to be addressed. And instead of lumping it all up into one issue, like just housing is going to solve it. How's housing going to solve serious acuity issues of behavioral health? You can't. You need a really deep, grounded, meaningful, responsive mental health system. And it's like they took it away, dismantled the mental health system and created, now PSH is kind of like permanent supportive housing is supposed to like take care of it, be the umbrella to catch it all. When no, we're about housing some vulnerable people, providing, some case management, some social support, right? But that's not addressing the mental health need. It's not addressing the medical need that's needed there. So I think that's one thing I wish the public would understand. That's what the issue is. There's more forms and more tools that we need. PSH is too big of a bucket to think that it's going to catch everything. We need more, almost like medical type of housing for some individuals, right? We need more shelter beds. We need more transitional housing. People who just really aren't ready to actually handle the lease or actually a permanent place. So they need more guided support. There's more tools that we need than just thinking you're going to build some PSH units and give everybody a key and problem solved. All it does is transfer the problems indoors into the units, and
Yeah. Are you, as the Chief Seattle Club, affected at all if this HUD change of policy goes through, the emphasis moving away from housing first towards funding more short-term, time-limited beds, this idea that they want to kind of front-load treatment and mental health care and basically give people a deadline. That would be the federal government's, change in how federal grants are qualified for. I understand King County is set to lose $26 million if that happens. Would you be affected as an organization?
Oh, well, definitely. Like, we're all interconnected, right? Like, even if we weren't direct funding, right to it, we still would get affected because our funders still are directly, right? And they would have to reimagine their own portfolio funding, right? So there's definitely, maybe even not direct, we're definitely indirectly going to be hurt by it, right? So yeah, it's always sad because I think that's going to the other extreme, right? That you need, it's more of like deserving poor versus non-deserving poor, right? And going back, 100 years and thinking in logic, that's not good for nobody either. But but there's still room to grow.
Yeah. And as you say, like different types of tools that are more tailored to the needs of the individuals that are struggling. Derrick Belgarde is the executive director of the Chief Seattle Club. I really appreciate your time, Derrick. Thank you so much, and I hope we can keep the conversation going.
Thank you, Libby.
Thanks for listening to Soundside. Don't forget you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 FM Seattle at noon and 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, or anytime online at KUOW.org or on your favorite podcast app.